Hi there, this is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video, we're discussing There's Someone Inside Your House, written by Stephanie Perkins. Now, this is a young adult horror, a slasher horror. I wanted to read this because of the Netflix movie, and I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie. I hope the movie is better, because this book wasn't really enjoyable. It wasn't for me at all. It's more a teen romance than a horror. And there's one big thing that bugged me about this book. Parts of the book, well, what the killer does is he moves objects around. Sometimes he takes objects, sometimes he moves them. It's meant to scare the victims before they're murdered. But the author refers to this as gaslighting all the time, right through the book. It's not gaslighting. That's not what gaslighting means. And I found that so frustrating in this book. It annoyed me very much. Every time someone mentioned it, or the book narrator mentions gaslighting when people move objects around, that just frustrated me, and I don't know why that wasn't picked up, but it's a big reason why I downgraded this book. Even though I didn't enjoy the book as a whole, the first part of this book, the first chapter, is really well written, and if the whole book was written in the same feeling, the same way, this would have been a really good story. So in the first chapter, we have a teenage girl at home alone, and then she finds an egg timer sitting there just ticking away, counting down time. She didn't put it there. She doesn't know who put it there. And it's quite creepy, and you get a very creepy sense from that. She moves it away, and then it keeps reappearing through the house at different times. And I think it even reappears when she wakes up in her bedroom. Now that's very creepy itself, and I found this first chapter quite gripping, quite chilling, and I just wish the whole book would have had that same feeling written in the same way, because it was so suspenseful, so much tension in that first chapter. Unfortunately, after that, it just falls into a heap, a big mess, and I was so disappointed with that, because that first chapter just made me think this was going to be great. So after the first victim, we don't get to see the killing in the first victim, but after that first victim, we have the usual things. So we have kids at school, traumatized by what happened. Then rumours start flying around who they think the murderer is. Is it somebody else at school? Who could it be? Is it a teacher? Things like that. Unfortunately, I don't think that was used very well by the author. It could have been used more, because there's strange kids there as well. Kids that, aren't in popular crowds, or kids that just seem odd. And that could have been used a lot more. Could have had a lot more tension between students, between characters, because of that. That was a bit disappointing as well. The author misses these chances and chooses to concentrate on a romance between these two characters, our main character, McCartney, and another guy called Ollie. So the author focuses on their romance rather than tension, suspense, and horror in the book. It takes quite a long time in the story to get our second victim, and during that scene, things are stolen, and the victim is wondering why these things are gone. Thinks it's a joke at first, then starts to panic and be a little bit scared. And it's not gaslighting. It gets referred to as gaslighting in the story later on when people start talking about what happened, but it's not gaslighting. So frustrating again. But anyway, after that second victim, things ramp up a little bit in, people being paranoid about certain characters in the story, but not enough in my opinion. There's still more about that romance between McCartney and Ollie. And that just frustrated me. This is meant to be a teen/horror. It's not meant to be a romance story. So I just found it really strange why the author focused on romance more. Another thing that annoyed me is that the author makes a big deal with the main character's past. So McCartney recently moved to this small town from Hawaii, and the reason she moved is a big secret. She says it's a big secret. Something happened in her past where everybody at her old school in the old town hated her. She had threats, online, death threats or whatever it was, and she had to move for her own safety. When we find out what the secret was, one, it had no relation to what's going on in the town at all. The reason for the murders doesn't link to her past at all, and all through the story, we get the impression that her past is linked to why the murders are occurring. They're not. There's no link there. So why have such a big deal about her past with this character, trying to suggest links to why the murders happen in this small town where she's now living? Also, just the secret itself isn't that damning, and it's my impression that what happened wouldn't have resulted in what happened for her in her past. That was strange as well. But being fiction, being a story, I'll accept that part, but what I won't accept is the author trying to put a link between her past and what's happening in this small town, when the reason for the murders, when we get the conclusion and the reason for the murders, there's no link there. So I was very frustrated about that as well. One other thing that the author should have used more, I think was a big miss, is Ollie's brother is a police officer in this small town, and sometimes leaves files lying around at home. Now Ollie's parents aren't there, so just Ollie and his brother. So Ollie has access to seeing what's in those police files, and sometimes he gets glances at it, but it's not enough made of that. We could have had a lot more about that. We could have had Ollie and McCartney and some of the other kids, their friends, finding out things from these police files, maybe secrets, maybe seeing things and making assumptions and guesses, trying to find out who's committing these crimes. But they don't have that in this story. I think that's a big miss. They could have added a lot in this story, in my opinion. The ending of this story was a bit of a mess as well, and it was just certain main characters running around town chasing rabbit trails, basically, trying to find out who the killer is, trying to get to possible victims before they're murdered by this killer running around. That was just really strange to me. I didn't mind the fact that we have the killer being exposed partway through the book. That didn't annoy me so much. It just added something a little bit into the book where we have people trying to hunt down this person while this person's running around the town as well. So it added something extra into the book, a bit of tension, a bit of suspense, which the book needed. It needed something to take away from the focus of this romance between McCartney and Ollie. But the conclusion, this whole chasing rabbit trails around as a group, trying to find out, track down where the killer is, things like that, towards the end of the book, that just annoyed me. I just felt that was a bit messy in the story. McCartney is our main character, our main focus, and she's the narrator of the story. But she annoyed me. I didn't really engage with her. One of the big things that annoyed me was this big focus on this big secret in the past, and the fact it didn't link to anything in the current storyline. That just frustrated me, made me think less about the character, and that's down to the writing, basically. But also, this character came across as a bit bratty, a bit whiny at certain times, and we get she's got a past, that quite traumatic past. She's shifted from Hawaii to this small town in rural America, but she's just a bit bratty and whiny, especially when she's with her grandmother, and her grandmother comes across as very caring, very loving, very supportive. We have this character that's just a bit bratty and whiny all the time, and just frustrates me. Ollie is more convincing as a character, which wasn't hard, basically, but he's not used to the degree I think he should have been used. The author could have made him more of a suspect. I mean, he's a bit of a strange kid, a bit of a loner, and in this book, that could have been used more. Make him, stand out more, make people more suspicious of him through the story, make him try to work hard to prove he's innocent, that sort of thing. But that's not used so much in this story, which was annoying. He's there for the romance angle, basically, and a few other little scenes he's used for, but I just found that even though Ollie is good as a character, he could have been used so much more in this story to bring him to the forefront, to bring his purpose in the story to life more. Grandma Young, who's McCartney's grandmother in this book, she's my favourite character in this story. I just love everything about this character. I love that she's caring, she's strong, she's clever, she's smart, she's clued in. I liked her addiction to jigsaw puzzles. I mean, who doesn't like jigsaw puzzles? Give her points for that. I love the way that's brought into the story, to bring Ollie into the story more as well, this connection with Grandma Young. That was used quite well in this book. It just gave Grandma Young a bit more substance, and same with Ollie as well, gave him more substance as well. So Grandma Young is my favourite character in this book. I'd like to see more of her in the story. We don't see enough of her. We do see of her, though, is quite enjoyable. We see this grit in her, this determination to keep people safe, and she just comes across as quite a strong character in this book. So even though we have this great scene at the start, and we have a couple of good characters in this book, most of this book is not good. The writing's not good. Just things that are put into the story, the focus of the story is not what I thought it should be. I rate it a 1.5 out of 5. Look, maybe this story just isn't for me. Maybe people like the romance angle and not so much the horror/horror parts of the story. If this is marketed as a horror, and I want it to be, I prefer the horror parts to be the prominent parts. I don't want this romance angle taking over that, controlling the book. That's what it seemed to do, and for me it didn't work. On my channel, I do review quite a few horror books. If you like horror stories, check out my channel and subscribe. There's also a horror playlist on my channel. Should be on your screen now.